Well, Eric, kicking things here off this week, you wanted to take things a little bit of a different route, starting with a little bit on the international weather side of things. Looking over at Australia is kind of where you're wanting to start, as well as kicking things off with looking at Brazilian weather as they're still moving through with their soybean harvest that they started here recently, and a little bit of safrinha corn planting that we're seeing reports of down there as well.
Yeah, it was just over the weekend when I was thinking about what I was going to be talking about this week. My mind just kind of went to some international locations, given that the pattern we're going to go into in the United States is something we've seen a lot of as of late. So, I'll start you in Australia. And if you think about Australia, I just kind of point this out real quick. A lot of their ag happens here and then basically there. Okay. That's not to say there isn't ag outside of those areas, but that's the big spot. And last week they saw a huge heat wave that hit this whole region with temperatures that were up there like 110 to 115 degrees in some major cities. And what I wanted to point out in this satellite data was that we've recently seen some very large bushfires take shape down here in parts of Victoria in New South Wales. Now, the big thing that the Australians are considering right now is what the shifts that are going on. They're going to be a major discussion point for North American weather over the spring and summer are going to look like for their fall and winter. They grow a lot of winter crops in Australia. But right now it's midsummer down there. And look at the heat that's coming on across still this area. Thankfully, a cold front has come through and it's rolled right through this area first and brought in some much cooler cooler air into the main ag regions, but it's still very, very hot into the interior. But there's something kind of neat here. I'm going to flip this over to show you precipitation. And if we add up the total precipitation over the next 10 to 15 days, the biggest driver of North American weather is actually this right here. That is where the MJO is going to try to live, which is over there coming out of phase 6 toward phase 7 and eventually toward phase 8. And it's a part, but it's a big component of what's going on in our weather here. From there, I do want to show you, I brought this up. It's just kind of interesting. I had some folks ask, like, how big is Australia? Well, if you want to see it compared to lower 48, it's huge. And I had this up there a moment ago, so might as well talk about it as well. If you're curious how big Brazil's growing areas are, they're massive as well. And we've talked on this, you and I have talked before that we still estimate that in the next decade, there's 40 million acres of additional land that could go into production in Brazil very easily. It's just an important thing to think about. That's like the size of parts of the Great Plains of the United States we're talking about. But right now, Brazil is kind of firing on all cylinders. If you look at the main growing areas, which I've highlighted here, there's a new record NDVI value. It's been record high in Mato Grosso now getting on 4 weeks, but the rest of the country is now caught up with it. And when you compare it to previous years, it's much higher, which means from space, the crop looks really good. I went looking for problem areas and they're just hard to find. Over the last 10 days, they got a little dry in this part of Mato Grosso, but over the last month, that's not a main concern area. And remember, they can grow a huge crop on half rainfall. We cannot do it in Illinois and Iowa, but they can do it here in Brazil. So when you start to see some of these precipitation values across key growing areas, still mostly above that 50% area, there's just rain. There's enough. Now, the forecast is going a little drier in southern Brazil. I don't think there's anything to worry about here. I was concerned a week ago about dryness coming out of Buenos Aires over toward Cordoba, but I'm not hearing any stories. No one's out there saying that this is something to be concerned about. So Dawson, as they go through harvest, I think that's going to be critical to see if we do stay wet in here. Maybe it slows things down a bit, but I'm not going to count on that. By the way, do you know what percentage harvested they are? I haven't heard any numbers lately.
They're still riding about 1%
Okay.
in Mato Grosso and a little bit under a percent just as the entirety, but Mato Grosso is leading that progress.
Yeah. I mean, in a month from now, it should be way more than half, if not approaching 60, 70%. So we know that they're going to be rapidly harvesting soybeans. In the US, kind of neat. This is a snow swath that we got from late last week's storm system, but most of the plains getting all the way up here into even southern Alberta snow free. There's good snows around the Great Lakes, and that's where we're going to be adding quite a bit more snow coming in. But the temperature's got to get right for that to occur. So we are going to melt some of the snow today and again tomorrow as the warmer temperatures hit this part of the country. You got 55 for a high tomorrow, Dawson. I'll be in Phoenix, so I'm going to have 72. So I'm going to beat you, but it's going to be a warm week. But watch the end of the week. That's Wednesday into Thursday. This is our first kind of push of some Arctic air. We're going to see another round of that on Saturday into Sunday coming across this part of the country. And if I could just show you, I would split this part of the country off warm and this part of the country off cold, with some of these events getting all the way down into Florida with some much cooler air as well. Big picture is this: massive ridge occupies the west, builds into the northeast Pacific and Gulf of Alaska, with time opening up a trough here. But Dawson, these are backwards, okay? If we wanted to cure some of our bigger drought issues, you'd want this trough in the southwest and this ridge in the southeast. And there doesn't seem to be a lot going on to get us there. And as a result, we're looking quite dry across much of the country over the next 2 weeks. Now, this is dry with respect to winter precipitation. You can still get snow and it's dry, but there is no big driving force in the jet stream coming through to kick off big lows that rip across the country. Instead, they're all doing something like that. And that's just important to take note of here. Now, last week's rains and some snows hit a couple of key demographics in through here, but missed a big section in the middle, and then missed the northern plains and missed the southeast, which is why statistically these areas are still looking at record dryness. I mean, honestly, when you go back 134 years, we're talking top 5, top 10 driest starts to any winter on record. And is there any hope in the near term? Not a whole lot. There's not a lot coming through. So let's go have a look at it. European model playing forward here. We got a system that clips through, all right, maybe brings a front through the mid-south, but that's not a lot of rain. And then we got snow with cold air coming in late this week. And this is by Friday into Saturday, dipping down here, some snow squalls coming through. And then we do, sorry, let me back you up there. We do need to watch out. Here it is. This is Sunday, early morning Sunday. There seems to be something dipping down here far enough to the south that might put a little dusting of snow along the southeast coast up to the northeast. But did you notice I didn't tell you anything about the west? There's nothing coming into the west. It's just clipper after clipper after clipper, and they will be adding up some snow. Let's go have a quick look at total snowfall. Adding it all up here, there it is. And watch, see that little system down there? There it is, Saturday, Sunday, maybe getting a little bit of dusting of snow along the Gulf Coast. So there's cold air, as you can imagine with this. But what's the problem? The orientation is like this. It's not like that. And that's going to be the big story. So I go in here and say, well, let's just start adding up some precipitation. And what you're going to see is this. This just, I mean, sorry, I shouldn't even go out past 10 days. That's 10 days. And you saw, well, something's coming out here past 10 days. Yeah, I know, but the models always do that. So just to put a point together, European model has some snow down south. The GFS does not. So I just want to make that point. But a lot of it's going to be concentrated in the Great Lakes, Ontario, Quebec, and in the Northeast. So here's who's dry. That's the chance over the next 10 days it's staying under 1/10 of an inch. And this dryness that's in the plains is just going to continue to be a concern because of how dry it has been so far this winter. Drought, Mid-South, Red River Valley, Arkansas River Valley, and pockets throughout the plains. Okay, what about beyond that? Well, most of the models still keep us in this pattern going forward. And that's why you see like the European model doesn't bring in anything into the West Coast really. It keeps a lot of the Midwest drier, except for maybe something creeping in here. It's also in the GFS, and it's really in the AI model. And that's because some of the forecasts way out there, I'm talking January 24th, are trying to do what I want, which is to dip a trough in the West Ridge in the Southeast, and boom, it just goes. But I've wanted this for months, and we've not been able to get it. I think persistence wins the day, which this is what persistence is. Heat west, cold corridor here. And watch this. Next 5 days, today 5 through 10, what do we have? Heat west, cold corridor there. And even day 10 through 15, cold, warm. You'd need to get all of this warm and get that cold to dip here before I even start talking about the reality of a big system coming into that area. So Dawson, I'll be honest with you, it's a lot of wash, rinse, repeat, except for California, which is finally out of the flow. But by the way, California is completely drought free. California is got its reservoir system at 129% of average. And as a result, they are sitting pretty going into the rest of winter 2026.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure people in and outside of ag are pretty happy about not having to worry about the reservoir systems to kind of move through the parts of the spring here too when things start melting. Moving on though, I mean, I was going to ask that question of, for the last week or so, we've been identifying, are we going to see a little bit of a pattern shift here for much of the U.S. that's been milder and drier? I know we did get those systems last week, but it's still a matter of, trying to chip away at a lot of these dry moisture conditions, especially in the southern plains. Are we still eyeing the potential of, seeing that for at least the main part of the Corn Belt? I know we've still been struggling on the side of getting something in the plains that could really reverse a lot of the drought conditions down there.
Yeah, the answer is in the near term, no.
Hmm.
I mean, we've got, if you look at this, what are we doing? It's been warm here. Where is it forecast to be warm? There. Where's the cool coming in from the CPC here? And, they're wetter, wetter. I don't know. That this is going to be a tricky forecast to get at the end of the month. Because what is wet in late January? Now, I could talk wet if I'm south or west, but wet in the Midwest is hard to come by. This is our dry season, if you will, in the Midwestern United States. So you mentioned what was going on. We did get a new drought outlook. I can't remember if I showed this last week or not, but right now it's got a lot of cotton belt, sun belt drought issues here. That's where they're predicting the drought conditions to continue across much of the rest of winter. All right, so excuse me, Dawson. Speaking of the rest of winter, look at this. MJO comes out phase 6, goes to phase 7 and phase 8. Now, if you let me dial up what I'd want, blow out of phase 8 right into phase 2. Can I show you why? You see, phase 6 ridges out west. So what does the flow do? Comes over the top like this. Phase 7 ridges just off of the west coast. So what does the flow do? Like that. That's the cold weather we're seeing in week 2, right? What does phase 8 do? The ridge is still sitting here. Flow comes over and down. Those are all 3 phases doing basically the same thing. But if we could get the MJO to break out and come down here into phase 1 and 2, look at this. Phase 2 in February, that ridge goes all the way to the Aleutian Islands. So that flow now comes over here. See it? See the same drawing, just now shifted? Then it dips around a big southeast ridge and we're in business. Now, I'm saying that's what would happen. Right now, we don't have any forecast evidence other than a few ensemble members trying to make that happen. But there is some other good news with this, okay? The global wind oscillation is beginning to come up. You're going, what the heck is that? Well, just remember this. If you are below that 0 line there on the bottom of this graph where we are right now, you get more big circumglobal ridges across the northern hemisphere. If it moves up like it's forecast to do in the next 25 days or so, well, you get troughs coming back into the flow. So we're a bit optimistic that that can happen, but most of the next 30 days, it's what you just saw, man. So why is the West so dry? Well, remember, this is the wet season for the West. So that's why they have the biggest anomalies. But notice a lot of the plains is drier. Notice the South is drier. There's a little bit of a wetter streak in through here, but this is primarily because systems are going to be coming through this area and they might leave a lingering front in there on which they could get a little more precip. But I don't think this is going to cure the drought that's in this area. Not even close. So Dawson, as I think through all of it, and I just wonder where this is going to go. This is, again, the mid-January to mid-February outlook. And if you want to see those temperatures, guess what they're doing? Let's take you through a 7-day kind of window here. That's week 2. Look, milder week 3. Oh, watch, watch, watch. Comes right back here again as you get into early. Here it is. Watch early February drop and the temperatures back down. So it's just that same thing. Warmth here, cold channel there. I'm waiting on this. We got some new information in from the Climate Prediction Center. It echoes what everybody else is saying. By summer, the most dominant mode in the tropical Pacific is El Nino. We've only had one of these in the last 6 years. That year was 2023 into 2024. So there's something to think about going forward. My best analogs today, now listen, these are just analogs for winter, are 14, 09, and 18, with 18 probably being the strongest analog that I have for you right now. But I don't know how long that analog hangs on as being the dominant factor. So that's what I've got for the longer range, Dawson.
Yeah, and I mean, just one quick question too on that longer range, just for context too, is again, typically in El Nino during that time frame, we are identifying potentially wetter patterns for the Corn Belt, correct?
Well, yes.
When it's the dominating factor.
Yeah, but it's the correlation coefficient with summer rainfall and El Nino is not as high as we'd want. But I'm going to show you this. If we go look right now at the seasonal precipitation anomalies for May, June, July, I mean, you can see it's dry here, but it's trying to make it storm in this area. I will show you this too. Let's go to U.S. Climate Division correlation maps. And if we just pick, let's just go to June, July, August. Let's call that the heart of summer. And let's correlate this against a multivariate INSO index, which is basically how you capture both El Nino and La Nina. And you look at precipitation. So where you see the warmer colors, El Nino tends to be wetter. But look at these correlations. I mean, in Iowa and Illinois, they're like zero point 0.3 to zero point 0.4. If they were like zero point 0.9, oh, then Dawson, we would have been done with our little briefing. I'd have said, oh, El Nino's coming, mega yields, maybe drought, maybe flood problems is what we're going to talk about. But these correlations aren't high enough, I think, at this point to be too aggressive on saying slam dunk forecast.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, just to put a bow on this, just more milder, drier conditions for much of the U.S. here over the next couple of weeks, it seems like.
Yeah.
Going to be continuing to identify, a shift in pattern, which is why we talk about this weekly and see what kind of goes on as we continue to move here throughout the winter. But I'll wrap it up is something else on your mind?
Oh yeah, something's also
Oh,
like
yeah, of
I
course.
want to be clear. I think
Yeah,
you
of
have a
course.
good point. It's milder and drier here.
Hmm.
But I think this is the corridor of
Right.
colder options and maybe some better precip if there is any precip in this. So I don't know. I just I need something to shift big in order to get. I mean, our problem is a big thing. This direction is not the way you go to get good winter moisture. It's got to be that direction. And maybe next winter, if we have an El Nino next winter, I won't shut up about all the flooding that's going on because of the southwest jet stream flow. So I don't know. That's just what you got me thinking about right before you wrap this up.
All right. Well, no problems. But yeah, gonna continue to identify that here moving forward. But always do appreciate your insights, Eric, and we'll talk next week.
All right. Sounds good.